Hey everyone, and welcome to the podcast this week. Last week we went over how to contact an agent, and this week we have a few other questions to get through. So we're going to do it like last week where I just answered some of your individual questions that you left on the podcast. Remember, you can leave your questions down below in the comments for a chance to have your question answered. It's a lot easier for me to answer your questions in depth on these podcasts opposed to just making an individual video about it because I can actually cover more on the subject. Okay, having said that, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video, and then we're just going to get right into the questions since we pretty much all know the drill now. So this is podcast number 3, and the first question we're going over, what attributes make a lethal striker? So I feel like this is a question many people ask. I mean, they may not word it exactly like that. They'll word it something like how to be a good striker, how to be an effective striker, lethal striker. And lethal striker, essentially to me means someone who scores a lot of goals, someone who gets a lot of chances and scores those chances. Kind of like someone like a Sergio Aguero. He would be considered a lethal striker because even though he's injured all the time, he'll come back and he'll score pretty much any chance he gets. For the most part, he'll have off games every now and then, but for the most part, he'll score all the time. So how do you do that? How do you become a lethal striker? Well, the answer isn't really easy, but I can definitely tell you the attributes needed to be a lethal striker. Now, first is you have to be I almost said very lethal, which would not help you out at all, but you have to be very decisive. And what I mean is, one thing about Sergio Aguero is he makes up his mind and he does it. You know, he doesn't really delay when he wants to take his shot. He doesn't really delay when he's going to take someone one-on-one. He pretty much knows what he wants to do before he does it. He's not indecisive. Indecisiveness costs many strikers many goals, where they get a one-on-one with the keeper or they have a chance and they kind of make a decision and then go back on that decision. It's kind of like if you take a penalty and you decide to go one way and then halfway through your run-up choose to go the other way, you're just kind of messing yourself up. You're being indecisive. So one thing that Sergio Aguero does very well is he's very decisive. He pretty much picks what he's going to do, kind of envisions it, I suppose, and then just does exactly what he's envisioned. So, for example, if he wants to put the ball in the corner, there's going to be no delay about it. He's going to take the ball as quickly as he can, get it into that corner as quickly as he can. He's not going to dilly-dally on the ball. He's not going to be indecisive. He's going to have that lethal touch, that decisiveness to put the ball in the back of the net. So essentially, being able to make the right decisions, which I think is something we're going to go over in this podcast as well, is decision-making. But as a striker, that's very important because if you're one-on-one with the keeper and you panic and you don't have composure, you're never going to be a lethal striker, because you're going to be going over all the options in your head, not choose one, and eventually the keeper's going to stop you, or you're going to shoot it right at him, or you're just going to, trip yourself up, which is not what you want. You want to be decisive. Have your mind made up. So whether that's chip the keeper, whether that's place it past him, whether that's round him, that's fine. Now, there are going to be times when you have to make a split decision based on circumstances changing, but for the most part, a lethal striker sticks to what they want to do and figures out a way to do it. So Sergio Aguero, I use this as an example because he's very, very good at doing this. But there's other examples out there. I would say Suarez is probably another one who is extremely lethal. Second thing about being a lethal striker, obviously you need good finishing. The reason Sergio Aguero scores so many goals is because when he makes these decisions, he has the finishing ability to then score most of the time. Same with Suarez. He makes many decisions that most strikers won't make, and he'll shoot from angles that most strikers won't, or he'll try things like that goal he just scored against, I think, Arsenal in the Champions League, that kind of volley goal he scored. He'll try those things, but because his technique and finishing is so good, he can actually pull them off. But if he didn't have good finishing ability, if his technique was poor, he would not be able to do that at all. He wouldn't be able to pull those things off. But he has the idea in his head, and he actually goes for it. And that's an example because many other strikers may have tried a few different things in that example. They may have tried to cushion it down to their teammate, or they would have just tried to bring it down and shield it and pass it off. But Suarez decided, I'm going to shoot this. I'm going to try and score, and he did. You see, he wasn't indecisive in that moment. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he carried it out. And that's something you need to be able to do if you want to score a lot of goals and you want to be that lethal striker. You have to be selfish at times in order to do so and shoot when many other players may not shoot. And in order to score most of the times that you do shoot, you need to have really good finishing. And the way to work on your finishing there's really no, there's no rocket science behind it. You need good technique. So you need to work on your technique. You need to work on striking the ball cleanly. You need to be able to work on different finishing scenarios, which means you need to just practice your finishing over and over and over again. And that's what these professionals do. They practice it over and over and over again. Another example that I think is really good is Harry Kane versus Arsenal. Poor Arsenal is the brunt of all my examples here. But Harry Kane against Arsenal, that goal where he curls it from the edge of the box off the post and in, it's an incredible finish. I guarantee you he's practiced that over and over and over again. He has to have to be able to do that. But that's another thing. Like, he could have easily waited for a teammate and tried to square it and pass it, but he made his decision, and you could tell right when he got the ball that he was going to shoot it. He made his decision, and his finishing ability allowed him to score. So that's two things. You got to be decisive, which is basically being lethal. You got to make your decision quickly. You got to stick with that decision unless you have to improvise. Sometimes you will. But for the most part, don't keep changing your mind, because that's just going to screw you up. Second, you need good finishing ability. There's really no way around that. If your finishing is poor, you're not going to score many goals, even if you get tons and tons of chances. Finishing is just your ability to put the ball in the back of the net in many situations. And if you can't do that, obviously you're not going to score as many goals. So you obviously need to work on that as well. Now, there are a few other attributes that make up a lethal striker as well. We could always go over things like speed, strength, things of that nature, but I don't think that necessarily makes a lethal striker. I think regardless of your physical attributes, you can still be a lethal striker no matter what. Obviously, those things help, and if you are fast and if you are strong, you should definitely use those things to your advantage. I'm not saying those don't help, but it's not the necessary traits that you need to be a lethal striker. Because if you look at people like Sergio Aguero and Suarez, I mean, Sergio Aguero is pretty quick, but there are quicker strikers than him. Suarez is actually average speed, average strength. But it's the way he uses both of those things. It's being intelligent. And I know I've gone over this plenty of times. Being an intelligent footballer, an intelligent soccer player, is very important for any player. And there's a reason that players that would be called lethal strikers are lethal strikers. And that's because they're intelligent. Their movement is intelligent. The runs they make is intelligent. Their finishes are intelligent. Everything about their game is intelligent. That's why when you hear commentators reacting to what they do, they always, react very positively, like going, oh, what a move by Suarez, or what a goal by Aguero. Because what they're doing is very, very intelligent. It's so nicely executed. It's really incredible that they would even think to do it and then have the skill to actually execute it. Another thing I would say makes a lethal striker is skill. This is something that's overlooked maybe with strikers sometimes, but even the strikers you wouldn't necessarily consider that skillful, but you would consider lethal, like the Lewandowskis, maybe Aubameyang, other strikers like that. They actually are pretty skillful. They just don't do the flashy stuff. You won't see Lewandowski doing two-step overs usually in scoring. You'll see him maybe chop the ball and score. You'll maybe see him do a Cruyff. And if you look at when he was at Dortmund playing against Real Madrid, he pulls off many good moves. But what these strikers are really good at is doing a move that creates a yard of space. As an example, if any of you saw the England versus Germany game where England won 3-2, Harry Kane did this perfectly. Harry Kane's not known as the most skillful player around. He's known as a hardworking, good finisher, lethal striker, I would say. But even these strikers who aren't considered like the Ronaldo skill level or the Messi skill level have a trick or two in their locker to create space. So if you look at Kane versus Germany, for his goal, he took the ball, he Cruyffed two defenders, took them right out of the game, and finished into the bottom corner. And this is a perfect example of that. That Cruyff created just that yard of space that he needed to get his shot off, and it resulted in the goal that started the comeback against the world champions. And that's what I'm talking about. To be a lethal striker, I think you need at least one or two things like that in your locker. You need to be able to have a move that's going to create you that yard of space for you to get your shot off. And someone said something about Kane in that game. They said Kane is really good at creating that yard of space or taking the shot early to fool the keeper or fool the defenders. And that's just really intelligent play. So make sure you have some skill. Make sure you're able to, do something that's going to create some space for yourself in the box or around the box. Okay, so those are the main attributes I would say. I'll just cover them once again really quickly. So we just went over skill. Have a skill mover too, because there are going to be opportunities in the box where you're going to need to create just a yard of space really quickly and then score. Now, that scoring part is going to come down to your finishing. So make sure you're working on your finishing. If you're a striker, you should be working on this, at least a few times a week, just strictly on your finishing ability. You can do it against a wall. You can do it against, on a goal. I recommend a wall just because that allows you to get more repetition in. But concentrate on your accuracy and your placement. Finishing doesn't require power. Honestly, if you just blast the ball at goal, most of the time you're going to miss or the keeper will save it. Learn to find the corners. Learn to pick out your spot. Learn to, learn those sneaky little finishes like chipping the keeper or rounding the keeper. You need to have all these finishes in your arsenal so that you can call upon them in a split moment, in a second in a match. Because sometimes I'll get the ball, turn around and see the goalkeeper is coming out real quickly, and I'll round him instead of doing what I originally thought. I know I said stick to your main decision, be decisive, but again, sometimes you will have to improvise if the situation changes, okay? So make sure you have that skill, make sure you have that finishing. Your intelligence. Now, this is going to be one of the harder ones to develop because it's more of a mental attribute. This one's developed, I think, by watching the best players in the world. So if you're a striker, watch the best strikers in the world. Watch Suarez, watch Lewandowski, watch Harry Kane, watch all of these players, and notice what they do. Pick up on what they do, and then emulate that. Do it yourself, Don't watch the best players and then not do those things or say, well, they're the best in the world, I can't do that. You absolutely can. The reason they're the best sometimes is because they've mastered the fundamentals. So watch what they do and try and copy them. Try and emulate them. And you'll start developing that soccer intelligence as well. Soccer intelligence can absolutely be developed. Don't get it twisted. You can absolutely develop soccer intelligence. It's not some God-given gift that only certain players or the elite among us have. It's definitely something you can develop by analyzing games, analyzing your own games, and realizing what it is you should be doing in certain situations, okay? So, and the last thing we went over is being decisive, picking your option and sticking with it. I recommend looking at players like Suarez and Aguero for this. Yes, you should be able to improvise because situations aren't always going to go as you want them to go. But have that ability to make your decision and then follow through. Don't be indecisive. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't be indecisive. Just think about it. If you were taking a penalty, would you want to be someone who picks your spot and then puts it in that spot? Or would you want to be someone who keeps changing his mind on the run-up? The one who's changing his mind is going to keep messing up. But if you just stick to your decision and nothing changes in the situation, so you're able to follow through with your decision, you do that. Again, one of my favorite examples is the Harry Kane goal versus Arsenal, where he just gets the ball and you knew immediately, you could just see it, that he's going to shoot this. He didn't change his mind. He knew what he wanted to do, and he executed it perfectly because he has great finishing ability. Okay, guys, so it's a combination of all these things that really, to me, make up a very lethal striker. Now, it's very easy to say in theory because, becoming that kind of level or caliber of striker takes hours upon hours of practicing each of those areas. So don't think you can just immediately become a lethal striker. But it does start with your mindset. So start seeing yourself as that good of a player. Start working on those areas that you need to work on, and you're on your way. Just take it a day at a time. Remember, you can't get from A to B within days. You have to keep practicing consistently, but if you do, you can start becoming a lethal striker. So that's what makes up a lethal striker. There might be one or two things I'm missing in there, but if you start working on all those areas I've mentioned, you'll be a very, very dangerous striker, and you'll be on the path towards becoming a lethal striker. Okay, so let's get on to the next question. We've already spent the bulk, about half of this podcast on just one question. So the next question I have here is how to use your body when getting the ball. We did a similar question to this last week, which was, I think, how to shield the ball out of the air. So it's going to be similar to that, but here's what I do, or here's how you should use your body when getting the ball. So if you have an opponent on you right away, you're limited in options when you get the ball. You could try and pass it off to a teammate right away. You can try and turn them, which is a bit risky, but sometimes worth it. Or you can shield it. A lot of the times, you're going to need to shield it, because if you can't turn in the space, either because they're too tight to you or they're defending you well. If they're too tight to you, actually, you might be able to turn them. But if they're defending you well, and let's say your teammates are not open as well, so you can't pass it. So in this situation, you're going to need to shield it. Now, the important thing with shielding it is you need to get your body between the man and the ball. It really comes down to that. And then it comes down to being strong, getting your center of gravity low. Do not stand straight up. If you stand straight up, you're very easy to knock off the ball. You need your center of gravity to be low. So if you're like me, I'm 6'3", I have to crouch down to shield the ball. Because if I stood up at my full 6'3" height, I'm easy to shove off the ball because it's just easy for someone to do that. My center of gravity is crap at that point. But if I crouch down and I get my body involved and I feel him out with my arm and I make sure that he's not getting around me, he's not taking the ball off me. I don't care what he does. The only way he's getting the ball at that point is if he fouls me. So the important thing when you want to use your body to shield the ball when getting the ball is just get your body between the man and the ball. Okay, so get in between the two. Now, a lot of you might think that for smaller players, it's harder to shield. It really isn't. If you do this effectively, if you use your body effectively, it doesn't really matter how small you are. At Liverpool, we used to have Raheem Sterling playing for us. And he's at Man City now. And he pretty much epitomizes this idea. He's tiny. He's a very small guy. I mean, he's not weak, but he's very short. But he's one of the best at using his body. He uses his body so effectively to shield the ball that no one can really take it off him. Some players even bounce off him because they expect to get it off him easily, but they don't. And the reason is because he protects the ball very well. He gets himself in between the man and the ball. So that's essentially what you need to be doing, getting yourself in between the man and the ball. Make sure the ball is far enough away so your opponent can't stab it away from you, but it's close enough to your foot that you could take it away or dribble it very quickly if you need to. Okay, so we're just going to stop there for that one. There's not much more to go over when it comes to shielding the ball. Let's get on to the next question. So the next question was, I thought, a strange one, but a couple of people liked it, so I'll go over it. And it was how to train by yourself without a wall. Now, I'm assuming you're asking me this question because you don't have access to a wall. And if that's the case, it's a bit strange, but I'll believe you. However, if you're asking me this because you don't want to train with a wall and you do have access to one, I have to kind of talk against that. Because if you have access to a wall and you just don't want to train against it, that's not going to help you. Because like I mentioned many, many times, one of the best ways to improve is to train against a wall. It's a multifaceted drill. It will improve you so much. So many players, even professional players, have become that good because they've trained with a wall. Now, if you actually don't have access to a wall, like that's a real thing and you can't find a wall to practice against, which I would first off say, look a little harder. But if you really can't, well, then it's time to start training your dribbling drills. You don't need a wall to practice. You need a wall to practice certain areas, but you can just have some open space and work on your dribbling, work on your touches. You can kick the ball up in the air and practice bringing it down. The great thing about a wall is you can work on your shooting technique, your passing technique, your ball control. You can dribble near the wall. You can do give and goes. You can do practically anything within the game that involves the ball against the wall. That's why I recommend players to use a wall when practicing. But if you don't have it, what I would concentrate on is your dribbling drills, is your touches on the ball on the ground. I would work on your juggling because that's another way to improve your ball control. I would work on kicking the ball up in the air and bringing it down out of the air. There's always alternatives if you don't have access to something. And again, I think you should have access to a wall, but if you don't, there's always a way around that. So to the person who asked me this question and anyone who's curious to what you should probably work on if you don't have access to a wall or you just haven't found one yet, I would work on those dribbling drills. I would work on getting many touches on the ball throughout the day. I would work on, just using both of your feet, the inside and the outside of both, and dribbling around. Work on your skills, work on your quick feet, work on your quick touches. Get really good with the ball at your feet. The time that you would be spending or when another player would be spending at the wall, be working on those areas. Again, it's more advantageous to use a wall, but if you don't have access to one, absolutely just work on those areas. And then when you get to a field, obviously work on your other skills. And when you're with your team, you'll be doing team stuff as well. Okay? But once again, let me just repeat, if you do have access to a wall, don't skip out on that. So hopefully you're asking me this because you don't have access to one, and you're not asking because you don't want to use one. If you don't want to use one, I would just say suck it up and use one because it's very, very effective, okay? So let's get on to the next one. We have about 10 minutes left here, so I have 2 more questions. I think I can cover both of them. First one, how to make good decisions, how to improve your decision making. This one wasn't actually on a podcast, but someone asked me this, and I thought it would be good to cover in a podcast. So again, this is another skill that's developed through practice, another one that's developed through doing it over and over again. So quickly, I'm going to tell you what makes a good decision and what makes a bad decision. So in different situations, there are different things obviously you should be doing in a soccer match. Now, this is an example of a bad situation, being you taking the ball into the box, having a defender in front of you, a teammate wide open in front of the goal who's onside and trying to shoot and having it blocked by a defender or saved by the keeper. And let's say you're at like an impossible angle. In that situation, the good decision is to pass and not to shoot. Now, this is just one example. Let's say for another example, you have 3 defenders in front of you and a teammate wide open in the center of the park who will be able to switch the play if you play him, and you decide to dribble. That would in most cases be the bad choice and the bad decision. Now, these are very, very simple ones because it's pretty obvious in those 2 scenarios what you should do. There are going to be more subtle situations where the right decision and the wrong decision aren't that evident, but there usually still is a right and a wrong decision in these scenarios. So what you want to get good at doing is making the good decision most of the time. There are very few players that make the perfect decision every single time. But it's the best players in the world who make the good decisions most of the time, the majority of the time, probably 70% or more of the time. And when they don't make good decisions that amount of the time, those players usually have a bad game. Players who make the right decision most of the time are players like David Silva. As far as I know, Paul Pogba. Zinedine Zidane was one of the best at decision making. Dennis Bergkamp was another good one. Players of this caliber. So as you can tell, these are all very good players, or were very good players, to the point of being world class, where some of them were world class. Pirlo's another good example. They made the right decision or good decision most of the time. Now remember, the good decision isn't always one decision. It isn't always one option. Sometimes there are multiple good options. But the habit you want to get into is making a good decision most of the time. So a lot of the time, that's going to include passing the ball. Sometimes it's going to include dribbling, sometimes shooting, and sometimes just clearing the ball into touch. If we take a look, actually, I'm going to use this as an example again. For anyone who watched the England-Germany game, John Stones did something just like this when he conceded the second goal. When Germany got their penalty, John Stones, just before that penalty was conceded, slipped and lost the ball. And the reason he slipped is because he tried to be too clever in a position where he was the last defender, and he should not have been doing this. He tried to dribble. He tried to pull a move, quickly take the ball somewhere else, and then pass the ball off. The right decision, or a good decision, would have been to play it back to the keeper. Another good decision would have been to just clear it. Another good decision would have been to have played it out wide. Any one of those decisions would have been good. Now, he decided to take the risky option and slipped, and it ended up costing his team a goal. So this is what I'm talking about, and it's something actually about John Stones' game which is preventing him from becoming a world-class defender and just makes him a great defender. But these are the kind of things I'm talking about. It's fine to take risks, but you need to know where and when to take risks. Where John Stones was in that moment was not a risk-taking situation. He should not be taking risks there because he's the last man, and if Germany get the ball, they're going to most likely score, or whoever the opposition is at that point. So that's an example of it. So another good way of getting good at realizing what the good decisions and the bad decisions are in matches is to watch professional matches and go over which moments professionals make the good decisions and the bad decisions. When they make a bad decision, go over what they could have done other than that. When they make a good decision, go over why it was a good decision, go over what the other options were, and if there was a better one. And once you start getting used to which situations, what the good situations are, or good decisions are in certain situations, the more you'll be able to remember that in actual games and do them yourself. So for whatever position you are, make sure you really pay attention to that position when they're playing in matches, watch them, and go over the decisions that they make. Determine which ones are good ones and which ones are bad ones. And do this over and over again. You have to do this a lot before you realize which ones are good and which ones are bad, and before you can remember them. And then do those in matches. And the more you do it, the better you'll become at it, and the more used to making good decisions you'll be. It's a habit like anything else, making good decisions and not bad decisions. It's a habit. And if you develop this habit, you'll become, not even just a good player, a great player. So this is just a quick example of what it takes to make good decisions over bad. A lot of them are going to be obvious. Make sure you're not making the bad decisions in the obvious situations. Like the John Stones example. The obvious way to deal with that situation was to clear it, or even more obvious was to pass it back to the keeper and retain possession. But he tried to be too fancy with it and lost the ball and ended up costing his team a goal. So in those situations, make sure you're making the right decision. And as you go along, in the more difficult scenarios, you'll learn how to make good decisions as well. And the more good decisions you can make in the match, the better you'll play in that match and subsequently in all of your games. Okay, so the last question we're going to go over is how to improve your weaker foot. And this won't take long because the answer is very, very simple. How do you improve your weaker foot? It's exactly the same way as you improve your dominant foot. Repetition. Working on it over and over and over and over again. Now, I always recommend when you're doing your drills, use your weaker foot at least as much as your dominant foot. And if you really want to get better at it, do more reps with your weaker foot than with your dominant foot. So for example, if you're juggling, and let's say you're juggling 100 times with your right foot, juggle 120 times with your left foot. This is going to allow your weaker foot to catch up to you. So if you do 5 step overs with your right in practice, do 6 or 7 with your left. If you do 5 Cruyffs with your right, do 6 or 7 with your left, maybe even 10 if you really want to accelerate your growth with your weaker foot. If you practice your shooting and you take 20 shots with your right, take 30 with your left. This is going to be work. This is not going to be easy. But the fact of the matter is, this is how you improve it. So it doesn't come down to how do you improve it, because you guys know how to improve your weak foot. You have to use it. It now comes down to the hard work. So you already know the smart part. You have to work hard and smart. The smart part is knowing what you need to do, which is work on your weak foot. The hard part is actually putting in the effort. Okay, so it really comes down to that. So whatever practice you're doing, dribbling, ball control, shooting, anything, you need to incorporate your weak foot. And that's essentially how you get better at it. There's no secret, method. There's no magic pill. That's exactly how you get better with your weak foot. It's how I got better when I was younger. I worked on it. I practiced with it. I used it more than my dominant foot in practices and when I was individually training. And that's how you essentially get better at it. But if you do this every single day, if you work on it every single day, you'll be surprised how quickly you can improve at it. It's going to be frustrating at first because if you haven't worked on your weaker foot before, it's going to take a long time. It's going to seem almost impossible. But there will be a point where things start to become easier with your weak foot. And once you hit that point, it's all going to be worth it. So next time you do a dribbling drill, make sure you use your left foot, or I don't know if your left foot's your weak foot, mine is. Whatever your weak foot is, make sure you're using that as much or more than your dominant foot. Next time you go shooting, take more shots with your weak foot and concentrate on working on your technique. This is really the only way to improve it. I know some of you might be looking for an answer that's much easier, but the fact of the matter is, if you want real results, they're not going to come easy. They're going to come through hard and smart work, okay? So that's really all there is to it if you want to improve your weak foot. There really isn't any more to it. Just use it. Start practicing with it. Stop avoiding using it. Yes, you're going to make mistakes with it. Yes, you're going to, struggle to get better at it at first, but it will happen only if you consistently use it and you practice with it all the time. When you were younger, you weren't amazing with your dominant foot. You probably don't remember, but you weren't good with your dominant foot either. But you got better at it because you kept using it over and over again. So you need to do the same thing now with your weak foot, okay? So that's the end of the questions. We're perfect actual timing there. Again, if you have any more questions that you want answered in depth, put them in the comments down below, and I will answer them in the next podcast, or I'll get to all the ones that I can get to. There will be a few podcasts where I do kind of my own thing and answer questions I think are very important, But if you want one answered, there's no better place than to put it in the comments, because I can answer it in depth and really, really get into it so you completely understand. So leave any of your questions down there. Let's see what we should do for if you made it to the end. If you made it to the end, put hashtag I am the best or something like that, and I'll know you've made it to this point. Okay, guys? So make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more podcasts and other videos. We release 3 to 5 every single week. Tomorrow, we will have a video out as well. Thank you for making it to the end. Put that hashtag I'm awesome. What did I say? No, I am the best. Sorry. In the comments, that'll just let me know you've made it this far. And just so you know, people who put that in the comments, put the thing I say to put for having made it to the end, I am more likely to answer your questions. So just a little heads up there. All right, guys, thank you for watching. See you on the next one.